Hi everyone, I'm Manisha Aggarwal and I'm here today as a member of IC3 Leadership Committee sharing a success story of an illustrator. With me today is Alicia Souza, popularly known as co-founder of the popular lifestyle brand Chumbak in India and a well-established illustrative designer and an entrepreneur. Alicia studied a Bachelor of Communication Design at RMIT University in Melbourne, Australia. She is currently a commercial illustrator, also referred to as a happiness illustrator. She runs two online stores that sell her illustrated merchandise. She has also been illustrating for corporates, businesses, and brands since the start of her career. Welcome, Alicia, and thank you for
Thank
giving
you
us
so
your valuable
much.
time to share your success story with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's lovely to connect with you. So please tell us a little bit about your high school, what subjects were you studying and how you decided what you wanted to study after school?
Okay, so I was born and brought up in the Middle East in Abu Dhabi, and in high school I actually studied maths and commerce, and I was really good at maths specifically, and I actually thought I would do a 9 to 5 regular job, which is especially in Abu Dhabi, everyone really goes there to have regular jobs. I didn't know anyone in the arts field really at all, so I was convinced that I was going to be an accountant. And except by the time I came to picking what we're going to do further on, we had one art teacher, and I used to do the covers of the school magazine. And it's not that I was really good, but I genuinely had such a strong interest, and she saw that in me, and she told me, in no other words, that I would be wasting my life if I picked anything beyond something in the arts field. So I was kind of stumped because there was no one to ask, no one to, basically talk about it. And I remember at that time there was Ask Jeeves and Yahoo, and I remember going through it, and it seemed like I really loved advertising. That was what the research showed me, that I absolutely loved advertising and logo design, and it all sounded amazing. And illustration was not in the background, like there was just not even an option. In fact, it sounded terrible. Because I remember very clearly when I was very young, I used to be obsessed. No, I loved illustration from the beginning of time, but I didn't have too much access to it. But in the newspaper, there used to be these Garfield strips, and I used to cut them out, and I made a folder of it. And I was recalling how I used to think that it would have been so hard to come up with an idea every day, which is so strange that I have to do that literally every day. And I remember that just didn't sound appealing. Uh, so anyway, so I got into I'm cutting the long story short. It was actually a long journey, but communication design in RMIT, and but I ended up doing all my projects really on a like very illustrative base. I don't know where to stop with this journey. Do you want me to continue till I started working? But that was the high school thing. I That's how I picked.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
I love the fact that you brought it up that there was no one to talk to. I think that's something
yeah,
that a lot of students struggle with, especially if they had that creative aptitude in
right.
terms of who to ask, what kind of careers are there as
Yeah,
well. And happy for you to continue with your story because my next question is about, the work that you're doing right now,
right.
why you're called a happiness illustrator and what are you working on right now. So if you want to share a little bit about that as
Sure,
well.
sure.
Thanks.
Coming to that actually, so I feel like students do now, there's always a plus and minus. So the thing is that now students have access to online resources, and there's so much information available that might actually be a deterrent, because there's so much information you don't know what to do. Because there's now, if you're an illustrator, you can be what type of illustrator, and that might just be too confusing when you're just starting out and thinking you might get into the field. Having said that, of course, the information is always useful. So anyway, continuing my story, I was in RYT, did my finished the course, and in my last year, there was one elective which I took up, which was illustration, and basically we just had to draw. And that elective changed my mind into what I wanted to do. I realized I don't want to do design. I want to do illustration specifically. I loved that elective so much, and then I put my portfolio together. It was all illustrative, and actually was out of town for my graduation. And I got a mail from my the uni saying that I got request from the local newspaper. They wanted me to draw. That was my first illustration job. And I loved it so much. I loved it like so beyond that. I was like convinced that I was going to do only illustration, or I was going to be something completely different. So so being in Melbourne, I was paying my way through living, and I actually worked in a bank part time, and I actually loved that too, and I was doing fairly well at it. So I had come to a crossroads where, and I was illustrating part time, and but the bank was being really lucrative in terms of how I was going to go, and I could see a future in that as well, even though it was completely different. But then I came into an opportunity where we were going to start Chumbak, and Chumbak was all the way in Bangalore. And I'd come on holiday to India, and I came to Bangalore and saw that we started manufacturing things. And so I was working on Chumbak when I was in Melbourne. And I'd come to a point in my actually visa process, which was actually good. It came at the same time. I had to pick whether I wanted to stay with the bank, and they were willing for me to stay on and, like, do the whole visa thing. But I was also at a point where I'm like, oh man, I literally get to draw and see them come to life. And I actually picked that, which was very scary and very daunting for my parents, who I actually didn't properly tell that I was moving to. And it was really scary because I had they, especially being brought up in Abu Dhabi, it was really scary to think that someone is moving to India. It was just maybe not as a usual option. Anyway, moved here. It was great for a year and a half. Started Chumbak, built it up, but then we split ways about a year and a half later, and that's when I started freelancing. And a couple of years later, or maybe a year later, I started my own online store. And honestly, that was another journey in itself, and an amazing one, because I think being a freelancer also, you learn so much more, not only about work but about yourself. You take so much more risk because it's just you. And then when I started my online store, it was that I met my partner, and we started the online store and took that to another level. So yeah, no, it's been a bit mad but great.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I completely agree with you that, students with a creative aptitude, they always have this dilemma to continue with the traditional stream of studies, accounting or engineering or whatever, or whether to actually take up a creative area as a career. So any advice, any thoughts that you would like to share with these students, if they are really interested in making creative side as a career?
Right.
What should they think? How should they decide? How should they proceed further?
Right, right. Okay. So I think one of the things for sure is to firstly understand that it's a job. It's not a hobby. So you don't really draw as, okay, this is for illustration specifically, I guess. You're not drawing only when you feel like it. You're not drawing for yourself. You're drawing for a brief. You're drawing for a client. And so you can't take your work or your drawings personally, like if there's a change and stuff like that. So that is one thing for sure. Secondly, is for if you're doing freelancing specifically, you have to be able to put in, like, be extra diligent. Like, you cannot faff. You're on your own payroll, you're on your own time. So that makes it even more like necessary for you to put in the time and be able to even manage your accounts, because maybe this month will be great but next month might not. So being able to, and being able to also, you can't only rely on that. You have to look at other streams. So if you're doing, you might be able to have an online store, you might be able to teach courses, whatever it is. So understanding how it's a whole business, but it's a business of your work, and you figure that out as well. So it's much harder in that sense, but it's also a lot more creative. You can be creative in how you're going to make an income. The second thing is also, you can just work at a job, and that's not, there's no right and wrong with the creative field. But I think with the creative field, you get to do these options. You get to have in a design job, and that, with illustration now there's more. And the reason why I ended up becoming a freelancer is because when I started, they weren't really those many illustrative jobs unless you want to work at a newspaper, which I really didn't. Illustrations tends to be a very contractual job, like you need the illustration for this project. Like I said, now it's changed. There's a lot more publication and online spaces which require illustration. So that's the field, and it's very lucrative if you do it well. So I don't think it's like before, where everyone's like, oh, you're going to be a starving artist, which is what I honestly thought. It's an extremely lucrative field. As long as you put in the time, you put in the work, and you're very smart with your decisions.
Thank you. I think that they're really good advice for the students who are looking at creative careers, be it in illustration or one of the other creative areas, because I think the principles apply to all of those fields as well. Interesting that you talked about, creative area being a business, because a lot of times students are not clear, whether it can actually be a viable career for them in the future. So that's really good to know. This recording that we're doing today is going to be viewed by a lot of high school counselors who talk to students on a daily basis, help them, make decisions regarding their future careers as well. So any word of advice in terms of how they can guide the students better, especially the ones, you've had some good teachers and academics who've made you helped you make that critical decision, of whether to move from accounting to creative area, or, from within the creative area to illustration. So any word of advice that you can share for these counselors in terms of how they can guide the students better?
Right. The only thing I would say is interest over talent. The reason for this being, it's really not, I mean, it is, I don't believe so. I don't feel like I was talented. I really just put in the hard work, and I think that's for a lot of fields. It's 90% hard work, it's 10% talent, and you can, as long as you put in that time. I'm saying this also because I've seen the most amazing illustrators from, like, when I say illustrators, as in kids who used to draw, who are amazing, just went into other fields. Because they'd have to work in a completely different way, and you never know if it's right or wrong. There's no right or wrong. It's just what you want to do. So if someone is really interested in taking it forward, and regardless of if you think they, in lack of better words, draw crappily, it doesn't matter, because they're gonna, if they are very motivated and they're gonna put in the hard work, it's fine. It's a skill. You develop a skill over time. Versus someone who just knows how to draw innately, and that might not come in handy when they have to put in the work when clients are calling. So that's the biggest recommend I have. It's not it's genuinely the hard work that kids want, and interest, very specifically interest.
Thank you so much, Alicia. That brings us to the end of our session today.
Thank you.
Once again, thank you very much for your time. It is
thank you
wonderful
so
to
much.
hear about your journey from high school to where you're today. And you've achieved so much in this time span.
Thank you.
A lot of valuable learnings for all of us in education in terms of guiding and counseling students interested in studying design as well. So we wish you all the best with your current work,
so
and look
much.
forward to seeing you more of your happy illustrations online.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Have a lovely day.
Alicia.
Thank you for having me as well.